Welcome to the Delingpole with me, James Delingpole. And I know I always say I'm excited about this week's special guest, but before we meet him, let's have a word from one of our sponsors. Sina Crisps. I used to eat loads and loads of crisps in my normie days, and then of course I discovered that they're all cooked in toxic seed oils, and so I pretty much gave up. The people behind Sina have come up with a brilliant idea of cooking crisps not in seed oils but in coconut oil, so they're actually not harmful to you. And they also taste good. Was that a good idea to eat my crisps in the middle of the advert? I'm not sure. Anyway, I just want to make something absolutely clear. Just because I'm starting to do crisp adverts doesn't mean I'm about to become the new Gary Lineker. That's a joke that will go completely over the head of non-British viewers, and I envy those who don't know who Gary Lineker is. They're organic, they are not ultra-processed food, no seed oils, and you can find them at www.sinacrisps, that's S for sugar, I-N-A, crisps.com. Use the code JAMES for 15% off your order. So again, I'm not Gary Lineker, and I envy those of you who don't know who Gary Lineker is. I'm advertising crisps, but they are good crisps. They taste good, and they're cooked in coconut oil. So check out Sina Crisps. Use the code JAMES, James, that's me, for 15% off your order. Welcome back to the Delingpole, Charles Malet. It's going to look worryingly like I've got you on for sort of topical reasons, but it's not that at all. I don't know how familiar you are with the podcast, but I don't really do topical. I don't like topical. It's sort of, but anyway, we can talk about maybe topical things yesterday. But first of all, I wanted to ask you. It amused me greatly. I, as is often my way, was late to appear on, and I knew that you, of all people, would be particularly upset because you're an ex-army officer, and I imagine that it's really important. What you know, the time in a battle where you all kind of go forward. What's that time when it's got a name, hasn't it?
Well, everything works backwards off H-hour.
H-hour, yeah.
And so therefore you'd have, every timing would be described as H minus or H plus, whatever it is. So yes, you'd be on the line of departure at, say, H minus 5, and then you'd progress from there. And I have to say, as a means of being able to calibrate and organise, it just makes so much sense because it moves. So it doesn't matter when HR is. There's your point, and you just work backwards or forwards off it, if you see what I mean, rather than being, fixated on, we're going to meet at 11:30, and then if ever the plan changes, hang on, well that's what is 25 minutes beyond 11:30 if now the start time's changed to 11:35 and whatever. But if it all just works off H, it makes sense. So it's very simple.
Basically, I did no damage at all because I just moved H-hour by 5 minutes.
Well, I think there is a bit of a responsibility on the commander to tell the subordinates that H-hour has changed. I think that would be the only caveat I might insert there, James. But no, otherwise it's been seamless so far.
It's not a gentle criticism of the commanding officer's timekeeping. I'm glad, by the way, I got promoted to. I think I'd be a really shit commanding officer. I'd be genial. I don't think I'd be very good at discipline.
Well, you shouldn't need to be. You see, I mean, I think this is probably a common misapprehension. And sorry for anyone who's tuned in and thinks this is going to be a wall-to-wall military broadcast. I mean, maybe it will be, but I think we'll probably go to other destinations as well. But no, I think there is a great sense especially from those that have not served. I mean, to a certain extent from some that have, that absolutely central to everything that anyone in the military does or thinks or says, discipline is at the heart of it. Now, that is all that matters. Now, to an extent, that's true because there is an absolute cast iron requirement for self-discipline. But the idea that people are constantly telling others around them to do this and not do that is absolutely not the case. And if you are, so therefore, to go to your point about whether or not you'd be a good commanding officer. If the system is working properly, then all of these, effectively, the higher up you go, and of course, commanding officer certainly is still, in effect, a tactical role. You've got a command that is an on the ground or sort of in the field command. But if everything's working properly, it should be very light touch, because it's driven by the mission and not necessarily by continual input from you. So you've outlined, you've been given your set of orders from which you devise your particular plan, how you're going to deal with that, and that moves further downhill. And so by the time something happens, you should really be able to sit there in your deck chair, feet up, just watching the battle unfold. I know people will balk at that. Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but the point is that if you're having to intervene and tell people that this should be happening or that should be happening, then something's gone wrong, which ultimately, of course, is your responsibility. But that should not really be the case.
So I wanted to ask you. I think it's quite a difficult question, actually, because I want to tell you about how I've changed since I last saw you. I think we met at Lord's, didn't we?
Yeah, that was the first in-person encounter. Yeah, I forget. I'd have to say I forget which particular game was underway, but yeah, we did. We met.
At that time, I was still stuck in the mode where, I was halfway to where I am now, which is, I used to be really into my military history. I'm still quite good at my dates. I still look at the past, Agincourt 1415 and so on, Cressy 1356. But of late, I have developed the view that all you wonderful army chaps that I used to so revere, and you still have qualities that I absolutely love. I mean, I'd love an army officer to organise, if it were I to have a garden party, for example, or were I to have a stage a kind of an equestrian event on my acres, it would definitely be an army chap. And also, I wouldn't mind being with an army chap going hunting, say. But I think that the military is, contra the line we're all brought up to believe, that you're guarding the nation and you're protecting us, enabling us to sleep in our bed. You are basically mercenaries for an evil international class of paedophile, vulture, satanic Wrongans, whose business model is perpetual war, and we are sold this line about nonsense like, oh, this is a just war because Mahit, or this is a just war because look at those evil Germans with their pointy helmets bayoneting nuns and raping virgins and all things as they do. And everything I've learned since my awakening about certainly recent military history, and it probably goes back all the way, is that I mean, you may be innocents in this, but you are not actually the good guys. You are not actually helping me. You're actually part of the machine that wants to suck my sons to die in a pointless satanic blood sacrifice orchestrated by the evil elites. Now, where are you on this?
Well, I mean, it might help the listener if you said what you really thought. I think I go along with exactly what you're saying, but I think I would just like to introduce nuance. I mean, for anyone who can think back to when we last spoke in this setting, which was, I think, more or less exactly 3 years ago, memorable, I think, in most part for the musical interlude that you inserted into the final edit. Absolutely spectacular touch. So I thought I'd have to reference that.
I don't. What was that? I don't have any control over what.
Well, I mean, there was a going back to where we started with H-Hour. There was let's say there was a planning oversight, and you had to go and do a station pickup, and then came back. But we stuck with it, so I waited, and you seamlessly mixed part one with part two via means of a jaunty musical interlude, which was very well received by, I think, everybody that listened to it. So that was great. But no, I did allude to this last time we spoke because I wanted to make clear, you did begin by effectively your statement that you thought meanly of yourself for not having been a soldier and that kind of thing. And I was very keen to make the point that there is absolutely a distinction between motivations for people wanting to commit to any kind of service in the armed forces. And I should prefix this. I'm not trying to say this to say, that none of this applies to me. Of course it does, because I absolutely was a part of an armed force. But my motivation, and I think my words was never the appeal of the guns and ammo side of it. I did not want to join the army in order to get the chance to go and have a pop at, some unfortunate person in a far-flung corner of the earth. That was absolutely never my motivation. Yes, okay, I accepted that may be a possibility at some time, but what I was wanting to experience was the absolute freedom, and I do use that word quite deliberately, the absolute freedom to be operating in an environment that is unconstrained in a way that many civilians never experience. Now, to your point about discipline and structure and everything else, that might come across as a little bit odd, but the things that, okay, it depends which branch, but within the army and what I was doing in particular within the infantry, you get to experience stuff in life and you get challenges thrown at you of a magnitude, both mentally and physically, that you will struggle to achieve or replicate elsewhere. I think probably not possible to meet elsewhere. Now, that was what I wanted, and I wanted to do that alongside other people that I would be able to depend upon, because I knew that they would push themselves to the limit without fail for their benefit and yours. And that is exactly what I got. So the warfighting side of it, the blood-sucking cabal, or however they're best described, is outside of what I'm describing, because those of us that had similar motivations as me, and there are plenty, people are not just queuing up saying, right, come on, show me the armory, I want to get out there and start shooting stuff or people or whatever. There is so much more to it than that. A lot of people are therefore absolutely completely reasonable and circumspect, but they do accept that they are the sharp end of what is in effect a political process, and as we all know, the political process is of course informed by things that are coming from well outside of Westminster in the case of the British Armed Forces. So I do want to make that delineation, and I would do so also with the I would say another obvious comparison. Let's take the National Health Service. I believe it's an absolutely rotten, abhorrent organisation and should never have existed in the first place. And I think a lot of people forget that those banging the national treasure drum need to look back at what was being said in Hansard over the course of the early 1940s, when they were desperately trying to pump it up because people were not in favour of it and they absolutely saw the dangers. But do I believe that people who are working for the National Health Service are complete rotters? Of course not. And I can see exactly why they're motivated to go into such an organisation, because they believe that's where they will be able to express their desire to help other people in a work environment. Now, if it's the National Health Service that is therefore your outlet for that, well, you're sort of stuck with it, in the same way that I felt I was, wanting to face the challenges that I've just spoken about and wanting to experience that level of camaraderie, if that's what one wants to call it, and do stuff that you just don't get anywhere else. Then you join the army. And this might sound hopelessly naive, or that I'm just ignoring the sort of bigger picture, but that is, I'm afraid, the way it is. Now, yes, when you look at how the sort of the law is written, how the direction from the political to the military actually works. I mean, for example, Joint Services Publication 398, which deals with the rules of engagement, is absolutely explicit in saying that rules of engagement are an expression of political will. Now, that is pretty amazing to read. So what it means is that if you're on the ground in somewhere that you probably shouldn't be in the first place, somewhere usually hot, Middle Eastern, and full of people who are ill-equipped and unprepared, and there's a change in the political wind, that might mean that the chances of killing more either combatants or civilians increases. Now that is absolutely terrible. That is reprehensible. Those sorts of decisions should be based on the commander's interpretation of the situation, the commander's decisions on the ground. So in saying so, I don't mean to advocate that violence should come no matter what. So yeah, it is a really, really complicated issue. But the point is, James, that there are a lot of well-intentioned, well-minded people who are just searching for a challenge of significant proportions. And I don't know what the answer is for people who want that and are looking at the civilian environment and thinking, well, what do I do?
Yeah. I don't disagree with anything that you said, and I wouldn't want anyone, particularly at the sort of what would be my cutoff point, say up to the rank of major, maybe. I wouldn't want any young chap or chapess to listen to this and think I'm having a go at them or accusing them of being sort of baby raping vampires. Don't give a shit about who are there to get their killing jollies. I understand totally. In the same way, people who go into politics initially, I think they do want to make a difference, and you make doctors and even people who go into the city, I don't think say to themselves, I want to become part of the Rothschild vampire squid machine, or when they want to help the economy. But all that said, it must be your awakening must have been quite difficult for you. I mean, have you read, for example? I mean, this is my key book of the last year. 2 World Wars and Hitler.
No.
It's a very tricky book for any, particularly I think, a military person to read. I gave it to a friend of mine who saw a lot of action in Rhodesia, and was formerly in the Paras, but he wanted to see a bit of action and stuff, and he read history at Oxford,
right?
And I gave him this book thinking, oh, this is going to blow his mind. And he read it, and it was like, it did not compute. He could not deal with he could not process the information in it, which is essentially that both the First and the Second World Wars was planned and executed by an elite, I hate to use the word elite in this context, but a clique of British and American financiers, politicians, aristocrats, historians, academics, and so on. They created Hitler, for example. They sort of headhunted him. He was one of the options that they groomed, and they wanted a nutcase in charge of Germany so that they could get the second round of war they wanted and stuff. Mm-hmm. And this was quite a shock from somebody who, when I was at prep school, I bet you had the same. They rolled out the gym mats, and then on this sort of projector, we'd watch films like Dunkirk with that stirring theme tune by Malcolm Arnold, and we'd be brought up. I called my prep school Cold It's. The war was in our blood, and we knew that generation's heroes, and we knew that they had fought a just war against Hitler, and it was our finest hour. We were told by guy that we were encouraged to believe was one of the greatest ever living. Mm-hmm. When you realize that none of this is true, or none of the narrative is true, it kind of messes with your head, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And I think the other thing I should say about people who've had direct experience of it is that, sadly, I am able to think back and bring to mind the names and faces of many people who are no longer alive because of this. And I'm not dismissing the vast number of people that have been left not alive in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, but obviously I don't know them. The ones I know are people that I served alongside and for what, I'm afraid, is the question. Sorry, and actually, just while we've been talking, the reason I've been looking down for anyone who's watching, it's not that I'm bored already. How could I ever be? But it's because I'm looking through this book, which I'm holding up to the screen now, which is called Tommy at Gomcorp, written by Thomas Higgins. Now, this is an account from the trenches in the First War, and I've just got to a bit that I think, encapsulates what those who were, in effect, forced into service in the First World War did actually see, and what they experienced and what it made them think. And so I've just got a bit on sort of, I suppose, fighting in an urban area. We rushed on yelling like fiends. We could see Germans in all directions running away down streets, rushing out of houses, anywhere to get away from us, and the awful shell fire that was pounding all around them. After them we went, longing to kill. At times like these, man is not human. He is changed into a bloodthirsty beast. His one desire is to kill. The Germans were mowing our men down by shells and bullets. A man's brains were scattered over the left side of my face and shoulder, but I did not notice until the charge was over. Whenever a German came our way, he was shot or bayoneted. There was no mercy. All we knew was that the Germans were running, and we wanted to kill as many as we could. They were the cause of the war, we were told, and we wanted our revenge. That is war. There we were, killing human beings who had never done us any harm, whose only crime was that they were Germans. This is the result of money, kings, and politics. At last, we got as far into Long as we could. Now that's just, sorry, I find that quite hard to read.
Well, thank you. I feel exactly, and I think most people watching them feeling exactly that same emotion.
But this book, it is amazing, the connections. This book was given to me by his great-grandson, who was an instructor of mine when I was at Sandhurst, and we always got on very well, and I saw him again at the end of last year, and he gave me this book, and I have been absolutely blown away by it. Of course, anyone who's had taken any interest will have read sort of similar accounts, but this is, he's somebody who grew up in North Staffordshire and joined because his mates were, sort of pals, battalions and whatnot, and we have this in line with exactly what you're saying, sort of black and white films at school and references to Colditz and whatnot. But there's also this, people didn't talk about the war. No one spoke about the war. Well, my contention, having read this, is that one of the main reasons people would not talk about it was because this is what they saw. This is what they realised had been done to them, and that they were killing simply for the sake of it, and so I think, as I say, there is nuance to this. It is absolutely reprehensible, but here he was, Thomas Higgins, private soldier, promoted to lance corporal. He saw it. He absolutely saw all of it. And I'm not going to flick through the rest of the book, but he then goes on to make some amazingly penetrating remarks about the king, about the supposed sort of welcome home for the heroes of the war. Awful. The absolute opposite happened. And again, in fact, I've got an article coming out in the next column, the Column magazine, which we UK column, which we've just started, a quarterly, and I write about this obliquely. But the Order of the White Feather. Just the absolutely horrific psychological torture that was done to these men who had been sent out, let's say, or decided that what they wanted to do, because they'd been sold this idea that there was an existential threat to their country. And this is so relevant. This is exactly where we are in 2026, or at least we were supposed to be put in 2025. Anyone, just read the Strategic Defence Review 2025. It is insane. It's written by 3 ardent Russophobes who are absolutely just, setting up every single possible piece of architecture to support war with Russia. And based on the idea, like in the First War and the Second War, based on the notion that there is an existential threat to this country. And therefore the answer, unbelievably, is to go and kill the people of that country.
Yes.
So all of this is very problematic, and I mean, I still, yes, like you, since we last spoke and whatnot, yeah, of course, I have moved on. We've all seen things, heard things, and thought things. I think my principles remain exactly where they were, but there is a difference in the way that one examines perhaps the evidence before you, or perhaps more precisely behind you.
Yeah. What's your analysis of the kind of general, I suppose they would be generally, the kind of people pushing for war? Are they so heavily conditioned by their training that they cannot see the wood for the trees? Or is it that is it a bit like working for Goldman Sachs and recognizing that you've got to kind of rape the opposition because business is business and it's what you do?
Yeah.
How conscious are they that what they're doing
I think so.
is purest evil?
Yeah. Well, okay, yeah. I mean, how many people have tipped up to see an orthopedic surgeon about a bad knee and been told that surgery is not the logical next step? I mean,
That's true. That's such a good point.
Very, very few people. And it's the same.
None.
It's exactly
None.
the same. Yeah, none. And it is more or less exactly the same with the old and bold. That is what they spent a career doing. And exactly like you say, I mean, the war narrative extended well beyond school. In terms of military doctrine, it is, well, actually, okay, I am out of date, but certainly by the time I left, which was more than 15 years ago now, it was still the Russians. Everything was still based on the Russians, their tactics, the spectre of their threat, and also their hardware in particular. Now, that would have been updated to a certain extent, but only to a certain extent because, of course, all the people who are potentially baddies and potentially enemies are, by and large, using either Soviet era or Russian kit or stuff that circulates within those sorts of countries. But yes, I mean, I think that's exactly it. That, choose your sort of aphorism, but they are almost bound to say, well, war is going to be the conclusion to this, and therefore to make the best of it in order to minimise bloodshed. Because to be fair, there aren't that many who are just out and out warmongers. There definitely are some, but there aren't that many who will do the sort of Ben Wallace line of, that's just where we kick their backsides in Crimea. And so
What
that do you not remember that?
was Ben Wallace? Was he a green jacket?
No, he was Scots Guards. But Ben Wallace was Scots Guards.
Is he just very stupid?
And then, well, I'm not. I don't know him. I'm not going to pass judgment on what he's like because I don't know. But all I'm going to say is report what he said I can't remember if it was at a press conference or where it was, but he said it. It's on record talking about the Russians, and he absolutely dragged out the sort of his Crimean anecdote, which was that apparently because we'd kicked their backsides in Crimea, which I think was a little while back, and things have changed somewhat, we'd be able to do it again.
Did we kick their backsides in Crimea? I mean,
well, exactly, yeah.
Stalemate, wasn't it? It was a horrible.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, yeah. We could probably spend a couple of hours on that alone, but let's not. Yeah. Anyway, he said that, and therefore appeared to be an out-and-out warmonger. He appeared to be, puffing himself up whilst safely behind a desk somewhere in Whitehall in order that those that he would have previously served alongside get put in harm's way. Now, that's pretty reprehensible. I don't see many generals doing that. I mean, recently, and to his very great credit, I spoke to Richard Shirriff, who was formerly... He left a while ago, but he was second in command NATO, so Deputy Supreme Allied Commander Europe, and he spoke to me for a UK column. And the reason I wanted to talk to him is because he was very outspoken in his criticisms of the absolutely insane Trump administration and hangers-on, particularly the rhetoric that was being tossed out by Trump and Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, because it was just narcissistic and stupid, and Richard Shirriff could absolutely see that it was not going to end well. However, he was also of the belief that the sort of Eisenhower line, the best way to avoid conflict is to prepare for it or to appear strong or whatever. I mean, okay, I can't disagree with that altogether. Of course I can't.
Except
but at the same,
just briefly, Ike
yeah,
was apparently an incredibly shit soldier. I mean, he failed throughout
yeah,
he was promoted because he was a brown-nosing political animal. So his
yeah, well, yeah,
aphorisms about war should be treated
yeah.
like.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Really?
funny, isn't it? Yeah, okay, fair enough. I mean, again, I don't know, but you hear similar things about David Sterling, who started the Special Air Service. So, I mean, how do you know, really, if you weren't there? But anyway, that's slightly to one side, but not totally to one side, because, of course, it does bring us up to date with the way that high office, as it were, militarily has well, I don't know whether it has necessarily changed, but the way it looks now is that it is not just a slightly political appointment, it is a totally political appointment. Because how else do you explain, in particular, I can't necessarily speak for the Air Force, but you look at the heads of the Army and the Navy at the moment, Rowley Walker, who was a grenadier, who, again, SAS and whatnot, and yet he's happy to sit there and say that he's effectively in charge of, an absolutely lethal force with X, Y, and Z capabilities, when there really is no evidence to substantiate that. So that sort of statement and rhetoric is absolutely selling his blokes down the river, because it convinces the political masters that, yes, we will just go and do whatever awful thing is put in our way. And similarly, Gwyn Jenkins, the first Sea Lord, Royal Marine, also Director Special Forces during the period in Afghanistan that's now under scrutiny with regard to extrajudicial killings by special forces, but that is a slightly separate issue, but only slightly, because of course it's a big stain on his record, or should be, but isn't, because it hasn't been properly investigated. But anyway, he's happy to sit there and say, yeah, we're a cutting edge hybrid navy, by which he means, we haven't got any ships, we haven't got any blokes, but we've got a few underwater drones, and therefore we're going to call it hybrid and make it sound good. Now how on earth do you do that? You spend 40 years in a service that presumably you feel very loyal to, only to get to the top of it, look back down at the blokes underneath you and say, yeah, don't worry, everything's fine, you'll be fine, when you're in the one seat that gives you a realistic chance of being able to do something better for them. And I know, okay, I'm still now kind of within the paradigm of making this sort of all make sense, as it were, and ignoring your very first point and question, but that is because I do make this distinction. I mean, despite the fact there is a political appointment, what's perfectly clear from that is that there's no influence going back out. So they're only on receive, which is absolutely pathetic, and I think it's eternally regrettable that the only people who ever speak out are people who've retired.
My late mother-in-law was married to a war hero who later went on to command the SAS for a period. And she said of him, he never lacked for physical courage, but he was lacking in moral courage. I suspect that applies to a lot of... they think they've got it covered because they've got physical courage. And I think moral courage is much, much harder.
I absolutely agree. But I mean, let's not limit it to the military. I think moral courage is in very short supply across all of society, and I think this is an absolutely vital component that people are not talking about nearly enough. And I think this is the great failing, and this is where we talk about views or our points of view or perspective or whatever evolving, and in relation to our discussion, in its sort of ephemeral nature, being at the moment 3 yearly, this is what I observe. I mean, I would say that we are, in that respect, the moral component. I think we are, and I'm sorry if this appears to be a sort of out and out pessimistic view, but I'm really putting it forward as a realistic one. I think there has been a deterioration of the moral component across the board. So I'm not just talking about people who are potentially within the Delingpole audience or potentially in the UK column audience. I think everybody has had sorry, and again, of course, I'm speaking generally. Clearly, there are exceptions to all rules, and there is still a very notable and not to be forgotten element of people who do not suffer from this. But I think in general, as a society, our ability to hold a moral course has taken a big hit.
Before we move on to other subjects, I wanted to ask you a specific thing, which is,
Yeah.
I was reading the paper the other day and I saw yet another gung-ho piece by Hamish de Breton Gordon. It seems that certain sort of former lieutenant colonels seem to get recruited by the military industrial complex to write gung-ho pieces hot for war. And he was talking about, yes, some people say that the tank has been rendered obsolete by drone warfare, but they were saying that back in the days when Germans were dropping stick grenades on tanks at Amiens and so on. And he was saying that, and they've got round the problem by putting cages over the tanks. And I was thinking, I was on a trip to Moscow last year, and I talked to some people who'd been out fighting in the Donbass. And they were saying how very much the war has changed since the beginning, and how the no man's land has got much bigger. And it is basically a kill zone, a hell zone, where anything that moves instantly gets taken out by drones. That they have this form of warfare now called trickle warfare, where you can't advance in units of more than two, pretty much, because you can't afford to lose any more men than that any time, and you have to sort of worm your way forward. This is clearly a form of warfare designed to exterminate as many people as possible, as pointlessly as possible. I never get any sense when I'm reading about that in the sort of the optimistic reports of, yes, we've got our tanks, we've got our men, and it's like this is the world that maybe in 1 or 2 years they are preparing to send our boys. What?
Right, so it's a very fair observation, and I think it deserves to be scrutinised and moreover criticised. I think for me, what drops out of it is what on earth is being pursued. What's the purpose of conducting warfare in such a way? And I don't mean to be obtuse by saying that, but the way in which, frankly, I would say anything should be considered is what effect are you trying to create? What is it you're actually trying to achieve as your end state? Now, I know this sounds like, oh God, here we go again, another bloody military anecdote, but that is simply how military planning works. So you, depending on whether it's sort of tactical or operational, but nonetheless, the principles are the same. You sort of work backwards. So you have your idea of what it is you want to achieve. If it's an operational plan, you'd then have one step before that. You'd have a centre of gravity. So that there'll be one critical thing that you need to achieve in order to make the thing happen. And then you work backwards from there. Now, if you've got a situation in which, say, like Hamish de Breton Gordon's talking about, where you've got a load of tanks in a particular area, and what you're trying to do is you want to hold ground, or you want to be able to protect this, or you want to be able to move through there. You want to have freedom of manoeuvre in a particular thing, whatever. Then you deal with the situation that confronts you, and therefore, if they've got tanks, then and they are using them in a position of overwatch or have a strike capability or whatever, yes, absolutely, it would make sense that you would have a similar capability. Admittedly, you are failing slightly there because you're not thinking particularly outside of the box in terms of the manoeuvrist approach and applying a sort of asymmetry to it. But nonetheless, that does make sense. Whereas, what you're describing there with these vast tracts of land, apparently, therefore, sort of perhaps best described as being no man's land. Well, what are you actually trying to achieve? Because you can't be said to be holding the ground if no one can go into it. and if no one can go into it, well then what is it that you're doing? So it sounds to me, from what you're describing, like we are in a process of, obviously I say that, use the word with some trepidation, but evolution, because people haven't really managed to match the incredible development of technical capability, particularly via the use of drones, and I absolutely include in that autonomous drones, and effectively the handing over of the battle space to the machine. But if that's the case, if that's what you're doing, then what the heck are you doing sending humans into that? Why would you do that? And as you say, apart from what looks like either a willful or a reckless commitment to killing them. To me, it makes no sense. But certainly, to your point about Bretton Gordon banging on about tanks and if you put this stuff on the outside of the tank, then it's perfectly protected and whatever. Yeah, okay, maybe for the first strike, but then it's toast. So, yeah, I mean, it's a bit ridiculous to be arguing like that. But yes, but as I say, I think the fundamental thing is what is either the operational or the strategic goal. And that is the bit that I think is being lost in all of this. And then you've got the media slant on it, because as far as the West is allowed to believe with regard to the media line, ever since February 2022, the only thing we've ever been told is that Putin is an absolute raving lunatic. He wants to exterminate and conquer all of Ukraine in order that he can then move on to the Baltic and then the rest of Western Europe. And there we go, big red lines on the map and whatnot. Well, I mean, crikey, show me the evidence.
Yes, quite.
So, and this is not, I'm absolutely not trying to say this is the bit where we say that Russia is the, it's the counterbalance to everything that's wrong with our society, and we should all be looking to Russia for sort of how to run a country and for salvation. That's not what I mean.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about the factual basis on which these sorts of points are discussed and argued, and the way I see it, it's a utter confection. No one can pull out a speech or an edict where Putin has articulated anything like that. So I go back to the question: what the hell? Bearing in mind we are funding this wretched campaign, why are we pouring money into it when all that's happening is a grand slaughter and bits of kit being blown to smithereens? What is the end state?
Yeah. And now here's the thing. I think the conversation we've just had is way more important and more interesting than anything that is happening at UK column right now in terms of I think that I don't want to look like I'm sort of giving you a soft ride or letting UK column off the hook because I've got lots of friends working there or whatever. But just speaking for myself, and maybe I'm wrong, I find this attention that is being focused on you and your business model, and without letting you off the hook, I'm thinking, hang on a second, we've got our leaders are trying to take us into war and kill all our sons in a war that we can't afford and is pointless anyway. We've got a media which is so completely corrupt that everything you read in it is a lie. We've got an NHS which is actually contrary to what it thinks of itself as the envy of the world. It's just a kill machine. Mm-hmm. And what I'm seeing on Substack and elsewhere at the moment is petty infighting and finger pointing over your business model. Now, obviously, you're going to agree with that because
a brief word, if you will.
Global warming is a massive con. There is no evidence whatsoever that man-made climate change is a problem that is going to kill us, that we need to amend our lifestyle in order to deal with it. It's a non-existent problem. But how do you explain this stuff to your normie friends? Well, I've just brought out the revised edition my 2012 classic book, Watermelons, which captures the story of how some really nasty people decided to invent the global warming scare in order to fleece you, to take away your freedoms, to take away your land. It's a shocking story. I wrote it, as I say, in 2011 actually. The first edition came out, and it's a snapshot of a particular era, the era when the people behind the climate change scam got caught red-handed, tinkering with the data, torturing till it screamed, in a scandal that I helped christen ClimateGate. So I give you the background to the skullduggery that went on in these seats of learning where these supposed experts were informing us, we've got to act now. I rumbled their scam. I then asked the question, okay, if it is a scam, who's doing this and why? It's a good story. I've kept the original book pretty much as is, but I've written 2 new chapters, one at the beginning and one at the end, explaining how it's even worse than we thought. I think it still stands up. I think it's a good read. Obviously I'm biased, but I'd recommend it. You can buy it from jamesdelingpole.co.uk/shop. You'll probably find it. Just go to my website and look for it, jamesdelingpole.co.uk. And I hope it helps keep you informed and gives you the material you need to bring round all those people who are still persuaded that, oh, it's a disaster, we must amend our ways and appease the gods, appease Mother Gaia. No, we don't. It's a scam.
Now, back to the Delingpole.
We've got a media which is so completely corrupt that everything you read in it is a lie. We've got an NHS which is actually contrary to what it thinks of itself as the envy of the world. It's just a kill machine. Mm-hmm. And what I'm seeing on Substack and elsewhere at the moment is petty infighting and finger pointing over your business model. Now, obviously, you're going to agree with that because, but I think it's
well.
True.
I mean, first of all, I would say that I am grateful for the opportunity to talk about it. I would also encourage you absolutely not to let me off the hook ever with anything, and that would apply to anyone who's speaking to me. But what I do absolutely appreciate is that you are speaking to me, because immediately we have created an absolutely enormous distinction between what we're doing here, which is talking. Admittedly, we're not in the same room, but we are talking directly to one another. There's therefore no ambiguity about what's being said. There's no confusion. If I thought you had an agenda or you thought I had one, we'd be able to absolutely sort of create this is the conditions under which we understood each other. Now, what characterises in general what it is that you're talking about is the absolute opposite of that. Now, I am going to make it very, very clear now that I am not going to engage in any discussion of any individual, because to do so would be incredibly undignified, unprofessional, and not at all to be concentrating on what really matters. So I should just state that. And as part of that, I am not in the business of bashing other people. What on earth is the point? I mean, what comes of it? So with that said, I think I would totally agree with you that there are many more important things going on in the world. And I would also say that, you know, going back to what I've just said about you and I speaking face to face, just so that people are aware of the, and actually I'm not even aware of all the stuff that is out there, but of those bits of it that I know are out there. And if anyone's, sorry, just to interject, if anyone's sitting there listening thinking, what is he talking about? Is he ever going to get to the point? UK Column is an independent news organisation that has been going now for 20 years. Now, that in itself is absolutely phenomenal if you know anything about the the climate within which we operate. So I'll just put that out there. Now, what has happened over, well, actually a period of time, but in particular, there's been a concentration of what looks like effort to try to discredit who we are and what we're doing and the way we're doing it. Now, that's been done via a variety of means, but what does absolutely characterise that, James, and which is why I'm so delighted to be able to talk to you about this now, is that not a single person has had the decency or the moral courage to come to us directly to talk about any of these things. So you will see in certain places that, in some sort of obscure social media post somewhere, a UK column had the right to reply. It would be great to hear what UK column had to say about this. That has never been said prior to publication of anything. And indeed, no one has made a direct approach afterwards. So I leave people who are listening to decide what they think about that. But when I go back to what I said earlier about the degradation of the moral component across society, that fits with this pattern. And as I say, I'm not name calling. People will know the various reference points that come to mind when I talk about this. But that to me is enormously disappointing. Now, as you quite rightly point out, and as I've just said, the fact is there really are bigger things going on. And also, I think the other element to this, I'm afraid, is that it is terribly patronising. And this is exactly what mainstream media does. To take one example in terms of the sort of either whether it's the sort of the business model or the suggestion, and here we go, controlled opposition. Very happy to talk about that, because I don't think anyone has really substantially pinned down what it means, what it is, or indeed any instances that are proven that it is being done or has been done. So again, it's very thin on detail.
Interrupt you there. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to play devil's advocate. I mean, I could see that one could make a case. Look, you, ex-military, ex-police, could perfect recruiting ground for.
Okay.
You've got Brian Gerrish, ex-submariner, banned by the Official Secrets Act.
As are you.
Easily me. Why am I?
Yeah. You are. Everybody is bound by the Official Secrets Act. It doesn't matter whether you've signed it or not.
I don't know.
So there we go. That's a good caveat, isn't it?
Deal that I didn't know about.
Yeah. Okay. No, I mean, okay. Specifically, that's on a technicality. That basically it means that if you tried to sell secrets to the Russians, then you would be done under the Official Secrets Act.
But yes. So okay. So there's you two. Who was?
Yeah. Alex Thompson.
Alex, of course.
GCHQ.
Alex, totally ex-spy, but is he really an ex-spy? Because who is ever an ex-spy? So yes. You've
absolutely. It's a gift, isn't it? I know, it's great. Yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah. But okay, all right. Now I'll play devil's advocate. What do you mean by that?
Well, this is.
I mean, as in, just point. Can you give a single example of that type of person? So a me or Brian type of person actually having some sort of continued connection with. I don't know.
So I suppose my honest answer would be I don't listen to enough of UK columns output to sort of be able to give you the only thing I know about that people complain. Well, there are two things. One is that they felt that you were being way too. You had a guy on a Chinese guy, and you were being way too kind of hey. China's actually great. It's not there's no surveillance and there's no there's no social credit system and it's all fine. That's one.
Yeah.
Other thing would be your insistence on not covering chemtrails, which is a subject that exercises a lot of us, and we're not persuaded by the line that where's your evidence, because actually how are you going to get the kind of evidence you'd need in a world where they're deliberately trying to keep it secret and you've got all sorts of NDAs and stuff and lies and secrecy. There are probably other examples, but that would be, I think, the line people take. That's how you are gatekeeping. You talk about some things, but you won't talk about the whole picture.
Okay, yeah, all right. Well, I think there's two slightly different things there, because as I say, my question was and is: has anyone, and this is a quite, I mean, I don't know the answer to this, but what I'm not seeing is anyone pointing towards, A has a connection to B, which is proven, and maybe there's either an exchange of information or money that results in C, in terms of this, because obviously the insinuation is that because I was in the army and the police, Brian was in the navy, Alex was GCHQ, that we retain some sort of connection with any of those services. Now, I'm not going to, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to ask you to comment on the three of us, but are you aware of anyone who fits into a similar mould, as it were, that does actually has ever been proven to have such links?
I suppose the territory we're going into then is whenever the discussion comes up about things like gatekeeping and controlled opposition, it always gets into okay. So for example, there are lots of people who suspect that Candace Owens is because of the size of her audience.
Okay.
Or loads of people, me included.
Yeah.
Think,
but still, I mean, it's still speculation, though, isn't it?
Yeah. But they think Tucker is CIA, and then you look at Tucker's output and you look at Candace's output. And say, but they say such cool things, and then they'll say, but they say the cool things in order to drop in 5% of disinformation, which is what counts and why they're effective. I can't clear you of that charge because I don't analyze your stuff enough to
and that's completely fair enough. No, but that is absolutely fair, and I'm delighted that you've said that, because this again goes straight back to how you introduced this, which was the, however we describe it, the sort of the sniping at UK column or whatever. I mean, I think, and this is where I say that the patronising element, because what I was going on to say is that let's say if we're to draw a rough divide, and we say sort of on our side of the fence, controlled opposition is the sort of it's the label that's tossed out in the hope that it'll stick to people in order that they get discredited, in order that their material is no longer considered to be trustworthy. And what I would say is that is absolutely directly equivalent to the very lazy demonising of people from the other side, in the way that people get called a far-right conspiracy theorist. It's exactly the same, because what it's not doing is dealing with the information presented. So the reason I describe it as being patronising is that you're putting out that these people are not to be trusted, and you're not actually substantiating that with anything other than the vague sort of aspersion that there is something, a little bit difficult to explain, like, he was GCHQ, or he was in the military, or whatever. Do you see what I mean? And I think what I would say is, well, can't people just be left to judge for themselves? We put out a news programme, and if they listen to it and they think, yes, okay, I go along with that, but I don't go along with that, well, that's absolutely fine. I just don't see why people need to be told. I mean, I listen to the BBC World Service every day, and I don't listen to the BBC World Service thinking, oh, wow, that is absolutely true. So, God, I probably will get Ebola tomorrow. I listen to the BBC World Service because it is an intelligence source for me, and it tells me an awful lot about the way that the BBC operates as part of the state architecture and the worldwide state architecture. So I think there's just an odd tendency, I would say, or an increasing tendency to patronise by suggesting that, first of all, I'm going to put something out there that is not challenging to the your satanic cabals or whatever. Instead, I'm going to sort of turn to my left and look who's around me and think, I'll tell you what, I'll have a pop at them, and then off the back of that, I will try to promote myself as a sort of superior arbiter of truth. And I think that's really unfortunate, because I think it leaves people, let's face it, leaves people who have been rendered very, very vulnerable by the absolutely dastardly psychological campaigns that have been thrown at them, in particular since 2020. And I think it's an unfair position to put people in, to further suggest that there are other people they may not trust. And I think, and this is why I think increasingly this sort of thing gets traction, because in effect, it's the sort of once bitten, twice shy. In 2020, people who were mistrustful of government and the health service and anything that appeared to toe that line, if they're presented with the suggestion that something or someone may not be trustworthy, then they will react to that. And I think, and unfortunately, I think that's what's being exploited, which is, I would say, unkind and unfair.
Do you think it's actually worse than that? Do you think that this is a kind of this is being orchestrated on any level by the enemy to take down UK column?
It's a very good question, and I mean, what's the point in speculating? Certainly, I have no evidence that is the case, but plenty of circumstantial evidence that it could be the case. And to give you an example, well, obviously we talk a lot about the censorship regime and the fact that a lot of our content, including our entire YouTube channel, was taken down for a number of years. So that's one element on the corporate side. Now, I used to be on Telegram, and I was investigating a story last year about a young Royal Marine commando who had publicly called out what I paraphrase, but what he described as the sort of wokeification of the recruitment process, and in particular the push to have a female Royal Marine Commando and this, that and the other. And he put out an online survey. Anyway, I looked into this. I spoke to him. I spoke to his brother, and I reported on it on the news. I then had a prolonged conversation with the communications directorate within the Ministry of Defence. And the reason for that was because it looked to me like there'd been collusion between the Ministry of Defence, Police Scotland, and whichever entity they use in order to interfere with a communications platform. And the reason I say that is because what this young chap had done was to create an online survey for serving and former Royal Marines to engage with, in order to get their views on whether they thought that, trying to push females in the Royal Marines was a thing. Now, it doesn't really matter what the issue is. The point is that during the conversation with the Communications Directorate in the Ministry of Defence, it became very clear, or rather it was admitted to me in explicit terms, that the Ministry of Defence had taken that survey down. They had actually intervened and taken it down. Now, let's just leave the sort of legal element of that out, but effectively I had not only unearthed that as being the case, but I had also caught them in the lie of the effective denial of collusion with Police Scotland. Within, I think, 2 days, I tried to log into Telegram. I say log in. I opened the Telegram app on my mobile telephone, and the whole thing sort of pixelated, and a little thing just came up saying, sorry, this number is banned. Now, I'm not very tech savvy. I assumed that was just a glitch or whatever, but it wasn't, because I tried the same thing on my laptop, same thing. It just disintegrated, and that was that. Now, when I set Telegram up in the first instance, this was a while back, it was before I was involved in any of this stuff, it was just on my own personal number. Subsequently, I'd started a work mobile telephone number. So I thought, even if that was just a problem, then I can get back round it by going on again with my separate work number. So I did. I set myself up on Telegram again. Same thing happened. Within, I forget, a very small number of days, the same thing happened. Now, the coincidence of those events makes it extremely unlikely that the determining factor was not my engagement with the Ministry of Defence and that Royal Marine and Police Scotland. Now, obviously there could have been a lot more done, one might say, but Telegram, of course, is the soft underbelly, because they're not, as an organisation, its armour, let's say, is much thinner than that possessed by Elon Musk or any of the others. But I think that illustrates, I hope, to an extent, that whether or not that's part of a bigger sort of orchestrated campaign, the fact is that things can be changed very easily and very quickly. And to rule out the possibility that there is a tension on UK column and indeed a meddling that may take effect in a number of different ways it cannot be dismissed. Do I have evidence pointing towards specific actions that have been taken by specific entities? No, of course I don't, and therefore I'm going to be totally clear in saying that I cannot substantiate that. Therefore, I'm not going to make the claim, but it can't be ruled out.
Yeah, this seems to be an issue that has, by design, I would suspect, is dividing in circles. So there are those who take my view, and then there are those who say, this is the end of UK column. This is good riddance to them. And so they talk about this guy Marcel Janker, this German-born Chinese-based person who I think now owns 25% of UK column.
No, he's German-born. He's not Chinese-based, and he's got 20%.
Okay, but generally the point people make is like, this guy has bought influence. I'm not really interested in your denials, because I mean, of course, you would say that anyway. But
exactly,
they cite as an example the Chinese person that you had on talking about sort of effectively whitewashing the Chinese record and stuff. And again, I'm not even asking you to defend that, because it seems to me it's the kind of shit that happens when you take on backers. You are going to be inevitably, to a degree, subject to some kind of influence. But what I would say is the kind of people who watch UK column ought to be more sophisticated news consumers than, say, the people who watch the BBC or ITV.
Yeah.
If they're not, why are they watching UK column? They've come there because they are critical and discerning, and surely it's up to them to go, well, I think this Chinese bloke's talking box. In the same way, by the way, germ warfare. We Jeremy Nell, I love him. We'd have arguments. He had on the other day this guy called Jim Lee talking about chemtrails, who I'm 95% sure has been co-opted. He started out as a kind of an honest researcher. He is now pushing a line which I think is absolute bollocks. The idea that the chemtrails are all in the jet fuel, and because the implications of that is that, well, we should really cut down on flights then, because this jet fuel is everywhere. And if chemtrails are just an innocent byproduct of aviation fuel, then we really need to look to how much we travel by air and stuff. I'm amazed he is still sticking up for this guy, but I don't look at this as an example that I don't see this as proof that Germ is fatally compromised. I just think it's I would call a dick move. He's been taken in by somebody that I think he shouldn't have been taken in. Isn't that how we should approach all these things, on a case by case basis? And if suddenly UK column starts running editorials on the lines of God bless the World Economic Forum and what we have to learn about Tony Blair, then we start to worry. But until then, I'm kind of thinking, well, leave the bastards, leave them alone.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I'm going to tell you what, have you heard about this bloke called James Delingpole?
Yeah. Yeah, he's great. I love him.
Well, me too. But you see the point. I mean, I think, I again, going back to the sort of patronising suggestion, if people are really labouring under the misapprehension that anything that goes out on UK column is an endorsement of that line, that person, then I think they've had a totally fundamental misunderstanding. And also, I mean, to your specific points, first of all, on China, I would be struggling to defend criticism levelled at us if we did not talk about China. I mean, can you imagine if we did not talk about the United States or about Israel or the United Kingdom? I mean, to fail to talk about a country with which we have a trade relationship worth over £100 billion a year would be remiss. Now, you're sort of, you're summarising, I think, what you perhaps have been told about what Carl Czar has said on his Silk and Steel podcast.
True. I didn't
perhaps,
bother listening to it. And I'm just...
Yeah, well, you see... Yeah, and this is, James, I think this is part of it. I'm absolutely not having a go at you, but what, going back to the point about sort of, sniping or attacks or whatever on UK column, I'm afraid to say that the other element is what I call this means that. And so to take a great example, Carl tweeted, but by the way, if you don't know who he is, Carl Czar is a Chinese man. He grew up in Chongqing in China until he was 14, moved to the United States, now lives in Indonesia. And he is very, very good on Chinese history. And he has a podcast with regular guests, one of whom I would absolutely recommend anyone listen to try to understand China's sort of place in the world now. An Aussie called Warwick Powell, Dr. Warwick Powell. It is very, very interesting. Now, if people are going to take, without discernment, that commentary on China is pro-China, that it is somehow pro-China to talk about China, well then, fine. Don't tune in, write us off, we'll all be damned. But I would say that is to really miss the point. And if you think that Carl, as a Chinese person, is unduly favourable of China and what China is doing, I suppose, again, I probably have to ask, well, what is it that you think you know that he doesn't? And there aren't that many people who are able to give a perspective like his. He grew up there through the 70s and 80s and saw the extraordinary economic shift. Now, I'm not saying that hasn't come at a cost, and I'm not saying there aren't issues, but I mean, he's not saying there aren't issues either. So the suggestion that anything that's being done by China is just being sort of glossed over or whitewashed, I'm afraid, is a really lazy accusation or assumption. It's a few cherry-picked instances. And sorry, what I meant to say was he sent a tweet in, I think last year, describing, purely factually, describing the Chinese push for 15-minute cities. And let's remind ourselves that exactly the same thing is happening in the United Kingdom. So this idea that China is doing something totally different from either here or anywhere else, I think is nonsense. But he wrote that was happening, and that therefore the idea, and explained it to a certain degree, that would mean that people are supposed to be able to get X, Y, and Z within 15 minutes of wherever it is they live. Now that particular thing, and I'm afraid to say, I do think this is very irresponsible. And again, I go back to the line of it being patronising. I mean, surely people can make their own minds up as to what they think that means. To me, I read it as somebody explaining that the Chinese are pushing for 15-minute cities. There's no opinion given either way. Right. And yet that is taken as you're pro, not just pro-China, but pro 15-minute cities. Well, how is it that you would do that? And then on, you've referenced chemtrails. Well, first of all, we have actually given quite a lot of editorial time to the various overtly declared weather modification programs that are going on around the world. It's a very difficult area because, of course, the rules and the way this is treated in different countries are totally different. And people are, like a lot of complex subjects, it is terribly confusing if you don't explain it properly. I think my question to you is, regardless of whether or not you think we give the subject sufficient coverage, I would say, when you look up at clear skies, what do you think is happening?
Oh, you just can't see it. They're spraying all the time. The different kinds of spray. So even on a clear, okay. I think they've been spraying in one way or another. But you see,
Yeah, but no, but that's an absolutely critical point, because I absolutely agree with you. I think the terminology, sort of defining terms, is so important. So where you say spraying, to me, that absolutely is the particulate matter that comes out as exhaust. I think to try and make an aircraft do anything else would be way overcomplicated. Why would you overcomplicate it? But the point is that this is happening all the time, and yet what do we hear about is people looking at cloudy grey skies and seeing that that's the problem. Surely.
I think we're talking slightly cross purposes here. I think that the spraying of us with there are various aspects to this. There's the weather modification using facilities like HARP and NEXRAD, bombarding the ionosphere with these. I mean, for example, the last few days around me have been incredibly windy. It's like being in a wind tunnel. Well, this is not wind like I ever remember before. This is a direct consequence of weather manipulation. So I think chemtrails is just a general sort of term. Sometimes it means the long trails that come from the back of airplanes that then dissipate and form banks of cloud. But
I mean, I would say straight off, I think people are just missing a massive open goal there. I mean, stuff comes out of aircraft the entire time. It is quite clearly not good for the sky and not good for the earth, and yet no one cares about that.
No,
why not?
No, you're taking the. I think you're missing. Yeah, you're taking the germ line there, which I think is absolute bollocks. I think I think anyone who gets what's going on, which you do, it seems, on every other issue apart from chemtrails, they would know that we are enthralled to people who are just monumentally evil in every way, and one facet of their war on humanity is the spraying of the clouds with noxious chemicals, which not only alter behaviour. For example, Prince talked about this, that they spray sort of black suburbs and it leads an increase in violence. They're spraying the crops and so on with barium and aluminium. They're doing all this. This ain't in the jet fuel. This is something else. This is not a byproduct of our selfish desire to go on holiday. This is something much more deliberate.
No, I'm not at all trying to suggest it is, and I mean I think that's I would say that's how else do you if you think it's happening like in the way that you describe, then how do you stop it then?
I'm not sure. It's like anything. How do you stop them? How do you stop them killing children in satanic rituals and harvesting their adrenochrome? How do you stop us going to war with Russia when it's all they want and all they're planning? I'm not sure that there are enough of us awake people to do anything about it. I think that we just have to kind of opt out, trust in the Lord, because he's going to.
That's fine. No, fair enough. I mean, but to go back to whether or not there's coverage of it, and people will listen. Some people will listen to this. Oh, you would say that, wouldn't you? But we have to think about the confines within which we operate, which is that we are delivering a news program. Now, the easiest way to discredit yourself is to put stuff out that you can't substantiate, and this is the problem. If somebody turns up with substantial evidence of what it is that you and many others describe, and by the way, by saying you, I'm absolutely not dismissing it, but all I'm saying is that for us to be able to describe a particular thing, we have to be able to do the A to B bit, and so far no one has turned up with that evidence. So therefore, we can't deal with that.
Charles, I do agree with your point. I think it's given to very, very few of us in the awake movement to be perfect in every way, and I think probably you're talking to the one person who totally gets everything. No, I'm teasing you. If I had to sort of explain your position for you. I mean, not you. I mean, UK column.
Yeah.
I think that you are hamstrung slightly by your model, which you've just said, which is that you are an alternative news site.
Yes.
Now, I said at the beginning of this podcast, I don't do topical, which is an incredible liberation, because mine's more of a just kind of throw ideas out there and see where we go, have conversations. UK column was never about that. You have chaps sitting in front of a camera in a studio with their ties, like newsreaders, talking about stuff that goes on in the news, and that is your strength, because it gives you a kind of an air of sort of a reassuring air to people who've been brought up with the news. But it's also your, I wouldn't say fatal flaw, but it is a flaw. For example, today my attention was drawn to a bulletin you did on Henry Novak, which to me is just like you. I think that the whole operation was a psyop. I think it's completely fake. But you, as UK column news, are almost obliged to treat it, until other evidence presents itself, as a kind of serious story. But the news itself, as I'm sure you'll agree, is a completely flawed concept. The news was created by the enemy in order to control public perceptions. So you are really fighting on in the enemy's, you're fighting on terrain of the enemy's choosing almost. The enemy invented the news, and yet here you are doing a news program. Is that too much to take in one go? Sorry, I didn't mean to spring.
No, it's not. No, I mean, I think, first of all, and again, I have to say it, I don't mean this just to sound like a wholesale rejection of what you just said, because it absolutely isn't. But you know, whilst I can completely understand why you might believe that to be the case in terms of it being a psychological operation and maybe it didn't happen. Yeah. You don't have any evidence to support that. So again, we're back in the same thing, and I'm not having a go at you because I can't, you know, how on earth can I dismiss somebody's opinion? That would be a ridiculous thing to try to do. So I'm not going to do that. But what I would say though is, if you look at the elements of it that are real, which is that police do exist and Sikhs do exist, and racial tensions are being forced to exist, and there is trouble in Southampton now. All of those things are spinning off the death of Henry Novak and the sentencing of Vikram Digwa. So, in a way, whether or not you believe it happened is neither here nor there. Well, what is important is how people, you know, and I go back to the moral component, how people do regard police, how people do regard those they live alongside, how people do regard the Sikh community as a result of this. Are people really going to be influenced to the point of thinking, yes, Sikhs are dangerous?
Yes, I think
that is... Yeah, absolutely. Well, that is why we report it. So going back to my point about the BBC World Service, we use the news cycle as a means of creating awareness about the issues that do not get presented by the mainstream. But that's the point of it.
I suppose this is a poor example of that, though, because Henry Novak is very much in the mainstream now.
I'm not saying he's not. I'm not saying he's not. Of course, the story is. I'm talking about the other elements of it. So like I say, the real existence and the conduct of the police. I mean, look at what Hampshire Police did. You know, and I don't know if you know about this, but Donna Jones, who's the Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire and Isle of Wight, she is admired. I mean, I probably have to be careful what I say, but she is admired in a lot of scandal, or at least allegations of scandal that are yet to come out. What's the first thing she's done? She's called for the Muslim, the Sikh exemption for the carrying of the kirpan to be withdrawn. Yeah. I mean, and then everybody gets the sort of, oh yeah, well, of course you've got to do that. Look, what's the result? Suddenly everybody is yet further neutered.
I don't want to waste your time saying what I think is probably clear to everyone watching this. I think the point I'm making is rather more subtle one, maybe, which is that I think everyone listening to the show pretty much knows the Kalergi plan, for example, that there is an orchestrated attempt. Well, it's not even an attempt, it's very successful, by the powers that be to dilute the white population in countries like this one, to bring in waves of immigrants often from cultures hostile, inimical to our own.
Okay.
That they are housed at taxpayer expense. We don't know what kind of training they're receiving, their military age, their fighting age. It could be that they're a sort of future UN police force, or worse, as some kind of Einsatzgruppen. We don't know. They're causing massive disruption to social cohesion. They're a drain on the exchequer. It's deeply unfair. They are making it, particularly in working class areas, they're causing violence. They're raping people. All this stuff that's happening is really, really bad. And to your point about the police are hideously woke because it's not their fault. They've been trained that way. They are probably anti-white. They are incapable of often making sensible judgments. But all that said, doesn't mean that the incident I'm describing isn't completely fake. Probably created by the intelligence services using crisis actors, betraying themselves, as always emerges several days after the event, after researchers have looked into it, using gematria, some of the numbers, the numerical symbology of their given names, the purple tie that the alleged father of Henry Novak, little puns like no whack, it wasn't a whack job, it was all this stuff. Now, I agree this is quite niche, but it nevertheless is likely true, in the same way that that the assassination on Trump was fake. The Charlie Kirk was fake. Now, I don't blame UK Colin for not going there, because that's not really your audience sweet spot. You're somewhere between me, you'd never go that far, and the mainstream. But you couldn't say that. I mean, there's never going to become a point where you say, well, hang on a second, was Henry Novak real, and was this a setup?
Well, I think if there was significant evidence or absence of evidence where evidence should really be, then absolutely we would talk about that. So, I mean, if anyone listening can bring to light or shed some more light on what you're saying, or produce anything that can be substantiated, then absolutely, of course, we would look at it. But the point is that what comes out of this, and that is why I make the point, it doesn't matter whether or not it happened, because if this is yet another log on the fire of impending civil war,
put there by the intelligence services.
Fine, put there by the intelligence, put there by whoever. It doesn't matter again. But the point is that I would say we all have an interest in averting civil war, don't we?
Well, I certainly agree with that one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so there we go. So I would say this is a very significant point, and this is exactly why. And if I didn't get this across, then that is a failing on my part, and I apologise. But my point is that this is yet another incident, and when I say incident, whether or not you believe it did or didn't happen, but it is yet another thing that is absolutely weaponised in order to create not only a divide between more than one element of society, but also between society and the police, between society and, supposedly the political masters and all this kind of thing. I mean, it is an absolutely deliberate effort to create instability. And it also adds weight to what exactly what you've been describing, which is the dilution of what we have been told to regard as British society. Now, I find this one really interesting because I go back to the moral component and what it is that binds society together. I recently interviewed William Dalrymple, who is, perhaps the leading expert on the East India Company and what it did. Now, it doesn't matter whether anyone thinks that he's any good at that. The point is that it can't really be contested that the East India Company ran the entire landmass of the Indian subcontinent from an office in London. So the point is that actually numbers don't matter. Social cohesion matters and moral strength matters. So I'm not trying to dismiss concerns around other people, different people, migration, whatever you want to call it. But what I am going to take issue with is people who suggest that all the problems are because of the other people rather than because of the people that are already there. And I would also take issue with the idea that there is an English identity or a British identity, because if there is, where does that go back to? I hear a lot of people talking about an Anglo-Saxon identity. What does that mean?
I don't know. I think
and the reason, sorry, just to sort of complete the point, the reason I make that exact contention is because prior to the arrival of the Angles, the Saxons and the Jutes, there were different people here. And so what it is that's being described, whether it's explained via the Kalergi plan or anything else, it's very obvious to see what is happening, which is large groups of people from elsewhere coming in. And the question is that going to fundamentally change the nature of the society that's already there or not? And if we're going to hark back to a time where we consider that the people of this country, England, rather than the United Kingdom, this country is an Anglo-Saxon population, then are we being, for want of a better word, consistent? Because the Anglo-Saxon label is attached to an invading population who, by force of social cohesion, which was obviously found wanting in the, at that point, resident population in England, displaced and therefore became the dominant power. So I don't mean to say, well, it's happened before, so therefore it's absolutely fine. Let's just let it happen again. But what encapsulates this is the pictures that you see on, say, Twitter of, oh, look, here we go, another church taken over by a mosque. How does that happen? And dull as it may be, I can qualify this absolutely because I have for a number of years been the secretary of my parochial church council, the PCC, and so I know exactly what does or does not lead to a church no longer being a church. And the only way that happens is if a congregation stops practicing and turning up to that church. Now, that's how this happens. Society breaks down. It is not broken down from outside. I absolutely reject that.
I think I sort of agree with you and disagree with you. I think you're a slightly glib and almost actually Guardian columnist glib about how that line about we've always been a nation of immigrants. I think that's just another enemy propaganda.
No, that's not what I said.
But it but you're making a more nuanced version of that argument that one shouldn't, that you almost
no I'm not that is not what I'm doing.
Okay.
No, I'm making the point, James, that if people move to a particular place, it is up to the people who are already there to either continue to live the life that they were living or not. Now, if British society had not already broken down, then it would not perceive itself to be threatened in the way that it does.
Okay, but
that's what I mean. That's why I make the point about the East India Company controlling all of India through a handful of people from London.
Okay.
It's to do with strength and cohesion.
But surely the dilution in and of itself is going to weaken weaken the culture, because you're going to have
Why? Why would it?
Well, okay.
Look at the Sikh culture in Southampton.
Okay,
there is a very strong Sikh culture there. That much has been obvious in the wake of what either has or hasn't happened.
Okay, so
no, they are in a minority.
I'll give you a tiny example. So, for example, the South Bank, that concrete monstrosity where they have arts and stuff.
Yeah.
I think that I haven't been following this story but that closely, that the new guy making the decisions is a kind of a photographer of Nigerian extraction, I think, or Jamaican extraction. I forget. He's black anyway, and he comes from a culture which is inimical to the kind of genteel classical music culture that a lot of South Bank concert goers would like. So he's taken away that thing from them, and in a way he's done what the government is trying to do to the fox hunting people. You know, they've got this good thing going, it's being stripped away from them. So you say it's
I'm James, I'm not saying it's not happening. What I mean is that you can look at the audit trail and you can trace that back to the particular meeting where there was a collection of spineless enough people to allow that to begin. This is my point.
But that's fake.
There is always,
isn't it? That's fake.
Well, it depends. I mean, it could be a number of things, but just that, you know, in contemporary, very contemporary times, just think back to 2020 when businesses across the land, or schools or whatever, they all had the choice. They all had the choice when they sat in those together and they read the government guidance or whatever it was. They all had the choice, and they could have said, no, this is not right. In exactly the same way that your man at the South Bank did not have to be appointed. He could. There are always going to be these forces that are pushing. Whether or not you open the door to them is entirely up to, I say is up to the people who are there. Now, that's been the failure. So, I mean,
that you can't. I mean, I think we would be unreasonable to expect everyone to have such enormous bollocks that you and I have. I mean, you and I know there are going to be exceptions in our audience as well. We are the exception to the rule. I think it's in the same way I feel about when I go and see a supermarket full of fat people. I don't look at them and think, you have no self-respect. You are just fat and disgusting. I recognise that the cause of their condition is often outside their control. We all live in a culture where there are these forces which, from every angle, whether it's from the sky or from the water supply or the food we eat or their control of organisations like the BBC and so on, they are waging war on all our values, and it takes stupendous powers of resolve and awareness to be able to resist it. I don't think it's fair to blame the British native population, the sort of the population that used to buy hardware from men in brown overalls and that helped dig each other out of the Blitz. I don't think it's fair to blame them for what's happened to them as a sort of lack of spirit, lack of will. We're under siege. We're under attack from every angle, and it would be great if everyone was as strong as you. But it's not really everyone's fault. I mean, you know, you and I didn't take the jab, but I understand why people did. You know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, you know, we're going full circle, aren't we? In a way, which I think is nice. And no, I mean, I'm not at all expecting of everybody the same. I mean, that would be totally unrealistic. But I think where I am pointing the finger is at the decision makers, because at that level there has always been a sort of righteous battle, and the element of psychopathy is by and large what explains, I mean, I suppose the twin elements of psychopathy and greed are what explains pretty much everything that we talk about. And the only way in which they're defeated is by people standing up to them. Now, we wouldn't be here today doing what we're doing if that battle had not, by and large, been won by the side of good until now. So something has gone wrong, because there has not been demonstrated sufficiently an element of resistance, which should, and I think in past times has, been there. I mean, obviously not with everything. I mean, clearly, you're quite right to point out that the First and Second World War were I would say, I don't disagree at all with what you've said that they were about. I mean, absolutely horrific and clearly, therefore, not resisted. But I think at so many levels, people who are in a position to affect outcomes via leadership have failed, and that exists at every level. I mean, another thing we were talking about in the because of this Southampton thing, we were talking about knives, and this reminds me about sort of mobile telephones. Again, the constant refrain of parents and schools is is, well, why do they let my child use a mobile telephone at school? And of course the question should really be, well, why has the parent given the child the telephone in the first place? And the constant sort of pushing away of responsibility. So no, I'm not just willy-nilly chucking blame around and telling everyone they're bloody hopeless. That is not what I mean. All I'm saying is that I think we're just being a little bit myopic if we really are only going to point the finger at other people.
Can I come and die next to you on the barricade, like in Les Mis?
No, you bloody well can't. You can't die anywhere next to me because we are going to thrive, James, and survive. That's the whole point of this. That is the whole point. And I tell you what, this is why you need to go back to the what happens, has UK Column got it right? Has UK Column got it wrong? Or blah, blah, blah. I mean, crikey, people just make their own minds up. And can we just turn the focus back onto what actually matters, decide what matters, and then concentrate on dealing with it? Because otherwise, what is the point?
Yeah. Thank you. That's a good. I've got to go to a puppy show now. So tell me.
Did not see that coming.
Could be the last puppy show ever. Unfortunately, if the government gets it this way. Where can people find you and your stuff and?
Well, everything really at ukcolumn.org. So if UK Column does happen to be something you've not heard of or heard about, I hope this has piqued your interest sufficiently to go and at least have a look. And we do, as James says, our core product is a thrice weekly news programme, but we also conduct interviews. We've got a couple of podcasts, one of which does talk about China. And we have much else besides, but also a heck of a lot of really, really good written content on a massive amount of subjects that have been very pertinent over the last 20 years. And we've recently released a magazine called The Column. Oh, in fact, I've even got a copy of it. How about that? Look, it is very, very good. It's very substantial.
I like typeface.
I have to say it has been. Tim Norman has produced this. It's absolutely brilliant. But I think mostly what I would encourage you to do, whether you end up agreeing or disagreeing with the way in which we approach things, at least come and have a look. Don't believe what other people tell you, because I tell you what, the only people that really know what's going on at UK Column are the people that work there and run it.
Thank you, Charles. I've really enjoyed this chat, and everyone, I hope you don't think I've let him off the hook. I don't think I have. I don't think
you have, no. But equally, James, I mean, it's perfectly obvious that there are certain things that we don't look at in exactly the same way. I'm never going to fall out with you over that. I'm really not. I mean, life is too short. What is the point? You are somebody that I would absolutely want to keep the conversation going with, and we are, despite some small differences, we are absolutely on the same side, and that is the side of humanity. That is the side of common decency. That is the side of treating people with respect and getting it right in life.
Yeah, but I'm never going to forget you're the guy that refused to let me die next to you on the barricades, and that's gonna rankle, Charles, I have to say. Thanks. It's been great chatting to you. Everyone else,
it's been good fun.
Come to my website, jamesdelingpole.co.uk, and have a look. Thank you. Oh, and buy me a coffee. I love it when you buy me a coffee. That's really nice. And thank you for listening anyway. I love you all, but especially I love the ones who support me, become backers, my backers. Thanks. Right. Now, are you up? There is now a new, better way of supporting me. If you want to, you can now subscribe direct at jamesdelingpole.co.uk. It's now got new features where you can subscribe directly to me. You get access to all my old archive material. You get my podcasts as they come out. And you can comment on the podcasts and you can communicate with me probably more directly than you can elsewhere. I think it's probably the best way forward. Also, it obviates the risk of my being suddenly randomly closed down by some of these other websites. I mean, they're not our friends. So if you want to support me direct, go to jamesdelingpole.co.uk and sign up there. Without your support, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. So thank you.
Support ridiculously honest, no holds barred, independent truth-seeking at jamesdelingpole.co.uk. The Delingpod is produced by Wolfish Limited. Guests are very kindly booked by the lovely Venetia. The show is edited by Andrew Warwick, with animation by Warwick A.